Dellann Elliott Mydland, and I am the co-founder of the End Brain Cancer Initiative. So thank you for joining us today for the End Brain Cancer Initiative's Caregivers, Self-Care, and Tools webinar. And this is our series number 2 this year. Today's webinar is focused on financial toxicity with the idea of how do you escape financial toxicity with a oncology or a neuro-oncology diagnosis. Our first speaker today is Brian Blondeau. And Brian, I've known Brian for a very, very long time. And it's great today because he's going to be speaking about not only his personal caregiving experience and lessons learned during that experience, but also lessons learned as he's had time now to reflect back on his caregiving experience. So, Brian, I'm going to read your bio, if I may, and then
Yes,
we'll jump right into hearing from you.
Thank you.
Brian is a caregiver. He was a caregiver for his mother during her glioblastoma journey. During that year, Brian recognized clearly the teamwork that was going to be critical to give his mom the best chance to live a comfortable life with the hope of beating all the odds every step of the way. During his presentation, Brian will share the story of his caregiving journey, how EBCI was able to help, and the important lessons he learned along the way. We are proud to welcome Brian to the End Brain Cancer Initiative team as one of our ambassadors. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing.
It's really nice to be here. I want to start just by saying I saw that my email is there on the very first slide. I want everyone to feel free to contact me, and I'll go straight to Dellann and her team. But I would also be glad to just receive any input or questions about my presentation. Thanks for putting that together. So again, my name is Brian Blondeau. I was in my mid-40s when my mom was diagnosed in February of 2015. And I want to bring up what I'm doing right now just as a homage to my mom. My mom was very much an outdoors person, very active, really, really loved nature and loved to include other people. And so at this moment, I'm actually on the west coast of the United States, enjoying the redwoods and enjoying the kind of nature that my mom appreciated and also handed off to me, the love of nature. So it's really nice to be out here and to share her story. I'm sure she'd appreciate that I'm able to share her story with you all and maybe offer a little bit of guidance of kind of how the caregiving journey can be very successful. This first slide, I want to mention, it ties into the next slide, which says the need for teamwork. But this first slide is really significant because you can see that there are a lot of people involved with caregiving. This is pictures of friends and family, all who gathered together and shared information almost on a daily basis for the entire year that my mom was getting treatment and learning about this disease. So that's a really nice slide. It really shows that everybody, including my mom, is smiling. We're all together and we're figuring things out together. That is what happened every day. What I would like to prioritize is this idea of teamwork. When we first heard about the diagnosis, I think I can tell you very sincerely that almost all of us, let's say about 30 or 40 or 50 people who deeply cared about my mom, had a different idea of what direction we should go when we heard about this. And that's why I wrote this short list of 7 bullet points to kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that came up. Before I start into this list, I want to, if anybody wants to jump in on this call and just ask for clarification at any time, please jump in. I certainly am more comfortable with a conversation than I am with just talking, but I'll be glad to continue on.
Brian, Brian, sorry to interrupt. I apologize.
No, it's not an interruption.
Also, if you do have a question and you want to just put it in the chat, please feel free to do so as well. I am watching those and monitoring them. And if you see them, Brian, you can address them. And if not, I will point them out to you.
Ah, that's a great idea, Dellann. Okay. So like I said, about 40 or 50 very close people almost immediately were ready to go on on their own individual tracks about how to help my mom. And some of the most, of course, the most common question is, what is this? Is this for real? Is this true? Are we sure? And those are my first 2 points. I am a logistics person, and my nature was to find out the answers to these questions right away. Whereas other parts of my family and very, very caring parts of our community were very emotionally affected immediately and wanted to come over and wanted to visit and wanted to care and wanted to hug. And we needed all of these skills. What our family did was we leaned into our general practitioner at the time. And we found out maybe about a month or 2 into the challenge that our practitioners were not part of an expert brain cancer center. And so when we get to point 3 there, I written, where do we reach out now to get the most accurate information the quickest? This was not possible for us because our general practitioner and the local healthcare system were not actually experienced with brain cancer. In my search for answers, I did a internet search, which most of us will do, and that is initially how I found EBCI. It was through a internet search. I'm going to go down to point 4. How will I gather the information I learn and share it with people who want to help, follow, know more, adjust, improve, and be creative in care? Once I found EBCI, there was so much to pass on to all the caregivers that I really needed a system that I could share with people besides email, besides phone calls. And that's why I've written that down, that's one of the characteristics we had learned, that once a really interesting and useful information started coming in, how do we spread it around to all these caregivers? This is one of our biggest challenges. And number 5, where can I find information to give friends and family so we can each research at our own pace and at our own comfort level? Once I started to distribute the information to everybody, I quickly learned that everyone had a different pace about how they wanted to read, how they wanted to listen, how they wanted to feedback. Some people wanted to talk immediately with solutions. Other people needed the night. Other people needed the weekend. All of them very legitimate responses, and all of their reactions once they got in their comfort level were very needed and very welcomed. So this is a characteristic that I noticed as well. Number 6, the majority of us wanted to know, who are the experts? Where are they located? How can we reach them like now? Do those experts fit in with our personalities? This is where EBCI really, really helped as well. They were able to steer me towards an expert location, and then we could do a little bit of investigation whether the personalities matched who we were and who my mom was. And number 7, I put, who are my partners in this challenge coming up? I had written here, partners who align with our lifestyle, are calm, inclusive, kind, considerate, thorough, curious. They love life, deeply care, and are ready to act now. I can tell you that when I read these characteristics of the partners who helped us through, all those characteristics are my mom. And I think that's how we came up with these descriptors. This is the kind of person she was, and the kind of people that we wanted to work with had the same characteristics as her and the rest of our family. So that's my slide about teamwork. I'm open to any question about that, but I wanted to just talk about how important that was to us. I can remember the day that I found Dellann and her team. I remember I was sitting at a picnic table similar that I'm sitting right now, and I found them and they answered the phone. And that was fantastic that they answered the phone. And I didn't have to talk but 2 minutes, and they knew exactly what I needed. That was such a breath of fresh air. And you can see here in my list, Dellann and her team immediately were able to tell me where I could go for help, like solid help. They were able to give me contact lists and the phone numbers and the emails that I needed. They actually told me what to ask them, who to ask for. That really saved me a lot of time and a lot of heartache. And number 4 point there is one of the characteristics I remember the most sitting at that picnic table is they really understood where I was coming from. That gave me a calmness and a confidence that I could pass on what they're saying to me, to the other caregivers. It was priceless. And the last point I have there is I got the feeling that Dellann and her team were willing to do anything they could to help me. And I really mean anything. And one of the things I remember the most is that they offered me to come by their office anytime I wanted to, or they even offered to come out and visit us if we needed that. So that kind of immediate response and inclusion was really, really helpful. And so that's my slide on EBCI.
Thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so what are those lessons learned?
You just mentioned that I've lived another 10 years since my mom passed away, and you mentioned that I learned a lot over the years. I've actually followed a lot of the support groups that are out there for brain cancer, and there's a lot of really, really well-meaning, really, really good groups, but I have not found a group that prioritizes getting these very, very succinct answers as quickly as possible, as well as EBCI has done. I think my first point there is talking to somebody before choosing a doctor is just significant, very, very important. I think most of us, our nature is to go to the doctor that we know, someone that we've already met, someone that we're comfortable with. If I think back on it, the best thing for us would have been to find a doctor who's an expert in brain cancer before we started having the difficult conversations. That would have helped us a lot.
Brian, can I interrupt you for a second?
Not anytime.
Thank you for sharing that with people, because that's super, super important. Is you really want to be working with the best of the best within this disease, within brain tumors and brain cancer and metastasized disease to the brain. And when we say doctors, we not only mean neuro-oncologists, but we also mean neurosurgeons. We want to make sure that if you are having surgery, you are working with a specialist, working with a neurosurgeon who performs brain cancer, brain tumor resections, pretty much on a daily basis, and is very interested in research.
Yes.
Right? I just wanted to add that.
I appreciate you adding anything, Dellann. I completely agree. It's one of the more difficult things to do, to look back and think about what you could have done. But I'm very privileged to be able to do this and talk about this way. If I can steer anybody in the right direction from the very beginning, I know that the journey is much, much more comfortable and much easier to understand if you can do it that way. I'm looking at all my lessons learned. I think I'd be best to sum it up. Getting the right partners from the beginning is one of the biggest steps you'll ever take. And I can't really describe how difficult that is to do when your heart is breaking and you're in shock. But I believe that EBCI, the way that you talk to people, the way that you verbalize all your experience, you're very, very approachable. And I want to say that I want to kind of integrate that into my lesson learned, that even in your worst day and your worst heartache moments, that if you can find an approachable group like an EBCI, that is the place to start. So I'm just going to say that is my summary of my lessons learned. And I'm going to go ahead and go off to the next slide, if you don't mind. Dellann already talked about this, and I completely think this is fantastic. Just if anybody is able to donate, $50 gets a patient one-on-one with personal patient caregiver time and engagement with the patient navigator and the clinical trial coordinator. This is just so valuable. And like Dellann said, it's free, but the free comes from people giving who understand how valuable this is. And then here's another way, in case you're thinking about it later, that you can support the work and mission of the End Brain Cancer Initiative. You can text EBCI to 44321. You can look at the website, which I've done many, many times. That's a fantastic website. And you can also scan the QR code right here and just give, and just know that it's people like me and my family and my mom and other people who know about this disease. Really, really thank you for your generosity and your understanding.
Thank you, Brian. It's really helpful for other people, caregivers, patients, healthcare providers, to listen to people's experiences, okay? So their healthcare experience. Thank you for sharing your story, Brian.
Thank you for giving me the space. I'm looking forward to doing it again.
But Brian, I want to just say it's very, very important for other people to hear others' experiences and their own journeys, right? Through brain tumors, brain cancer, cancer journeys, really, because everyone learns from everyone else. And I think that we don't share stories maybe enough. We should
Mhm.
be able to share more stories because we know their tools, their educational tools, because we all listen to other people's stories and we all listen from them and their storytelling and their adventure with this disease, with cancer. But we're talking about brain tumors and brain cancer today. The other thing that I want to be sure to stress to people, and particularly the caregivers that are here today, the End Brain Cancer Initiative never ever wants you to ever feel bad about something that you didn't know about, that you learn from others or you learn from us. Because as a caregiver, nobody, we don't know how to do this, right? Nobody teaches us how to be a caregiver. You kind of are thrown into it and you do the very, very best you can, and you learn along the way. And the other thing that's important as a caregiver is you are able to do the very, very best that you can do with the resources you have, the information you have, or the resources you're given, or the information that you're given. And so I know when I was a caregiver for my late husband, I learned a lot, but I still, of course, didn't know everything there was to know. I did reflect on some things later on, but then I learned not to beat myself up because I did the very, very best that I could based on the information and the resources that I had. And that's really all we can ask from anyone. So I just wanted to make sure we shared that with all of you. Thank you, Brian. Anyone have any other questions for Brian? I see something. Okay, someone says, how do you recommend managing urgency for starting treatment or tumor resection for full diagnosis with the importance of getting second opinions? Okay, super question. Does anyone want to address this before I do? Brian, do you have a take on that?
Yes, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
The question is fantastic. I think this is exactly what happens. Our first doctor is telling you to do something now. And I've met very few doctors who recommend a second opinion when you're talking to them themselves. So the pressure is really on. Like, what do you do? Like, do you go get a second opinion, or do you answer this doctor right now who's saying, do this now? It's a tough one. My answer is 100% take the time to get a second opinion, because it is amazing how much information there is mixed out there among different doctors that you couldn't even imagine is out there. And sometimes in the pressure of that first diagnosis with the first doctor, they're trying to give you answers and they've forgotten to tell you something, or they don't specialize in something that you could use. So I think the second opinion is just paramount importance beyond an urgency to get treatment or tumor resection. That's my answer.
Thank you, Brian. Tori, do you have your hand up?
I do. Yeah, I wanted to weigh in basically from also my personal experience where my tumor was to the point where it was actually life-threatening. So we didn't have the luxury of getting a second opinion and had to just put our trust in the provider at the time because they discovered the tumor on the 22nd of July in 2020, and I had it resected on the 24th, and I was inpatient for that time so that they could monitor and be able to get me in even sooner if need be, because it was causing, it was called uncle herniation, and they said it was life-threatening. So yeah, I did not have the opportunity. So I think that's one of the things. How serious is this tumor to get out right now versus do you have the luxury of waiting a few days to get a second opinion?
Thank you, Tori. I actually will say that if we're just talking about GBM, there's 5% of all of the surgeries, the resection done to remove a tumor that ends up being a glioblastoma, glioma. 5% of them are an emergency situation where that tumor does need to be resected. It does need to get out of somebody's brain. The other 95%, because I know most of you that are listening today will understand what I'm going to say. Most of you had something that happened to you or your loved one that brought you to your local ER. You went into the ER, they did some tests. They probably did a CT scan. They may have done an MRI. And then they probably said, it looks like there is a mass. We're going to admit you for 3 days, and we're going to put you on steroids to bring down the swelling within your brain caused by that brain tumor. And then we're going to have surgery. We're going to remove that brain tumor. That is standard practice. It's not standard of care, but it is standard practice. And what most of you are going to understand is that when this kind of a situation happens, you're scared. You don't know what to do. They've just told you you have a mass and they're going to be operating on it. And it is very difficult to get a second opinion within 72 hours of being admitted into the hospital, particularly a second opinion from a specialist. So my message to you, the question that came up was, how do you recommend managing urgency of staging treatment or tumor resection for full diagnosis? You tell your healthcare provider, whoever that is, when you're admitted into the hospital, that you want a second opinion. All right. And you want a second opinion prior to surgery. And then, of course, you're going to want at least one second opinion, maybe more, after surgery and when you get your diagnosis back. So just in a nutshell, because we could just simply do one webinar on this particular topic, and maybe we will in the future, but the End Brain Cancer Initiative can help you with that. We can execute second opinions for you. We can move your medical records for you into the hands of specialists. We can help you with those second opinions, even the urgency, even urgent second opinions. So just know that. There was another question that came in. So this happened to my husband. We did a nationwide clinical trial search. It says we did. I don't know who the we is. We ended up with the treatment that our original oncologist recommended, but I felt more confident in the decision having actually gotten 2 additional opinions. We did them virtually. We sent our medical records to expedite the process. It took about 1 week. Awesome. Wonderful. Yeah, it really is helpful that when you do get second opinions, the opinions are the same. And when they're not the same, it can be hard and it can be confusing, but it means you really need to look at everything, every opinion that came back. You just need to really look at that information, and just know the End Brain Cancer Initiative can help you with that too, because we have so much experience in this space. And then if you need another second opinion, feel free to get it, because sometimes that provides clarity. This has been a really great discussion, you guys. Thank you for participating.